So here are our two starting points resource books that you will probably know quite well. So today, much of the material I'm using comes from these books. The starting points, what are they? So here's a list of the 7 key areas selected as the starting points for learners. But these are the areas that we as teachers work on with our learners to enable them to read and write so they can get to those first steps of the learning progressions. So most of our starting points learners are not yet at step 1 of the learning progressions and read with understanding and write to communicate. So you'll see I've highlighted print and word concepts because that's what we're going to work on today. We're going to focus on the rules and the conventions and the practices that govern the use of print and written English language. And you'll see that these aren't done in isolation. These areas overlap and we work together. Concepts about print and words. So what does it mean? So today what we're going to do is use that triangle that we know pretty well. Know the demands. What are the demands of print and word? Know the learner. How do we assess the learner in relationship to concepts about print and word? And know what to do. How do we develop learner knowledge of print and word? So that's what we're doing today. Back to our 2 books. What are the things we instinctively know about these 2 books? Look, we know that's the cover, and the cover has the title on it. We know that if we want to skim through this book, that we can flip through it from back to front. We know that if we want to read the book, we read from front to back. There are things that we take for granted about the design of this book, or these books. The layout. We know it's going to have chapters and contents pages. We know that there might be some illustrations in there. There might be some illustrations with captions. There might be diagrams. There might be academic language. Many more things we know instinctively about these books. Here's a picture of the contents page from one of these books. So it has page numbers. We know that there's going to be an index, appendices, titles, subtitles. We know that this is a reference book or a textbook. We know that we read from the top of the page to the bottom of the page. We know that there are going to be page numbers. So we know about the conventions and practices of engaging with print. But what about your learners? Let's look at know the demands. So read through these. Print and word concepts require an understanding of left to right direction. Right text direction, top to bottom of the page, that words are made up of letters, and these words can be written in upper or lower case, that we have spaces between words, spaces to separate lines and paragraphs, and that books and other text forms like newspapers, brochures, flyers, forms we need to fill in, cards, letters, they all follow a pattern. Now it's possible that the learners that you're working with are only familiar with a very narrow range of text. So you need to expand this in your teaching, introduce them to other forms of text when appropriate. The Starting Points Assessment Guide has many ideas to help you identify where the gaps are for your learner. Let's know the demands. Why? Why is it important to know about concepts of print when it relates to reading, learning how to read? And it is because this knowledge helps adults to read. So as learners read, they draw on knowledge that includes these concepts about print and word, as well as their knowledge about letters of the alphabet and the sounds that each letter makes, and then their relationship between those letters and sounds, the decoding. Here's our triangle, concepts about print and word. We've talked about knowing the demands. We're now going to move on to know the learner. But before we do that, are there any questions? I'll scroll through to see if you have put up any questions for me. So we'll move on then to know the learner. How do you do this? Okay, you can assess a learner's concept about print. Now you can do this informally, or you can do it more formally. So observe your learner handling books and handling other texts, the newspapers, forms, cards, letters, brochures, flyers. Or you can check with them on a one-to-one basis, and I'm going to go through a couple of the assessments, the surveys from the starting points in this webinar, things that you will do with them confidentially. And you can combine this assessing with a teaching activity. So you're doing some of this know what to do at the same time as finding out about your learner. So what we'll look at next is the initial survey from the Starting Points Assessment Guide. And I've copied some of the questions here on the screen for you. This initial survey is very long. I think there's something about like 47 questions. But you chunk it, you do it, not all in one hit. And using this initial survey, you get a lot of information about your learner. Here's another section from the initial survey. And knowing these things helps you in the next stage, knowing what to do. Also in the Read with Understanding book, the READ book, there's an attitude to reading survey, which many of you probably know about and have used. This attitude to reading survey, for some of your learners, this too may be appropriate for you to build up a picture of them. Okay, another way of knowing your learner, finding out what they know about print and word concepts. Now this is an example taken from the Collections 4 series, Someone I Could Look Up To. You probably know about these. These 4, 5 and 6 were written for adults who are at entry level and around step 1 and 2 of the learning progressions. Now I know that that's going to be too high for many of your learners, but we're using this as an example of what you can do in Know Your Learner. So here's the cover of the book with the title, Someone I Could Look Up To. And this is the book it comes from or related to. Here's the contents page, and we're going to be looking at the story on page 21, Volunteer Work by Iona McNaughton. And here's the story, Volunteer Work. Now you'll see that this is very dense text, and many of your learners couldn't cope with this. It's not suitable. So you can choose a text that is much more suitable to your learner, and you just need to make sure that the questions in the survey, concepts about print, relate to it. And here they are in the next slide. This comes from the Starting Points Assessment Guide on page 46. And there are very clear instructions on how you conduct this. So you will see here the first one. Show me the front of the book. What does the cover usually tell us? And in the brackets are the desired answers that you want from your learner. So in the quotation marks, the speech marks are what you, the teacher, asks them. There are 14 questions. You'll see at the top the analysis page. I have there now. The 14th isn't listed. The 14th is because the question is something like, tell me what else you know about books. So this analysis page, you analyse what your learner has told you, and you would then work from here in terms of know what to do. So this is quite a fine-grained assessment in relation to concepts about print. Okay, we've done know the demands. We've looked at know your learner, some ways you can know your learner. And before we move on to know what to do, are there any questions for me? What are levels questions 1 to 3? They are higher, I think 1, 2, 3 and 7 are above that. They're higher than entry level and steps 1 and 2. I could actually find exactly that and email you the question. Sorry, Karen, did you ask me that before and I missed it? We'll move on to know what to do. Okay, firstly, you would discuss the learner's profile with them, what you found out about them, and what you plan, the work that you've planned, and you will discuss this together. So your learners probably need lots of practice in handling books structured, being able to predict what's going to be in the book, not only the content, but how the book is laid out, or whatever text it is that you're going to be working with. So handling, becoming familiar with them, talking about, looking at the book title, pictures, discussing, predicting. So we know there's about a lot of learning to read. It's about building our vocab, and building our vocab comes from talking, listening, the listening and speaking, which is so important. Look for specific terms, a specific word, a specific letter, the letter S, the letter D, maybe that's a letter that is contained in their name, or the street that they live in. look for particular pictures, and use, again, your different texts for doing this. And there's a lot of environmental, easy print out there, newspapers, brochures, flyers, ads, various forms they may need to fill in. Matching words from the story title to the text, we had the one volunteer work, so you see the word work in the title. Can you find that word work in the text? So find texts that are appropriate and relevant and meaningful to your learners. A continuation of knowing what to do, here are some of the things that you can do yourselves which will practice what we've just talked about before, these activities. So you can do shared reading, this as a whole class, using a PowerPoint or an overhead transparency, or you can have it written out. You can be reading along with them and then ask some of those questions that I had on the previous slide. Paired reading with you, or if there is another appropriate learner to work with. As I've said, choose texts that are relevant to your reader, that means something to them, and use the variety. So they get used to a variety of texts to practice. Now some of these activities are also in Read with Understanding book, the Read book. Fantastic list of activities there on round about page 26, 27. So have a look there. Something I can highly recommend is from the Literacy and Numeracy for Adults website. This is the Professional Learning in Communities. You may have discovered this already. So go to the website, click on Professional Learning in Communities, and you'll find these learning modules. There's, as you'll see, vocab, comprehension, reading. There are fantastic video clips in there of Dr. Tom Nicholson working with various learners. And he goes through the concepts about print survey that I've showed you today, as well as all of the other surveys, assessments that are in the Starting Points assessment guide. And he also demonstrates how to give feedback to your learner. It'll take you some time to go through these modules. However, they are presented in little bite-sized pieces that are very easy to manage. So look, that's a very quick flick through concepts about word and print. Know the demands, know the learner, and know what to do. So are there any questions you have for me? Okay, well, I'm glad the modules are new to some of you. They really are great. So there's my email address up on screen. I'm very happy to answer any of your questions. And there's the website for the Professional Learning and Communities. If you don't get all of that website down, just go to Literacy and Numeracy for Adults and click on Professional Learning and Communities.